One of the most common questions that students ask me about is how to blunder less in chess. And today I'd like to share with you my proven methods that are going to help you to increase the accuracy of your games in no time, right after watching this video. I'm Grandmaster Igor Smirnov, and let's go ahead and get started. And the very first piece of advice is to stop saying I just missed it, because that's one of the main reasons that students tell me of why they made the wrong move. Let's take this game as an example. It's the game between Larry Christensen, one of the former US champions, against Anatoly Karpov playing black. Here it was black to play, and Karpov played knight to h5, attacking this bishop here on f4, so the bishop went back to e3, and Karpov continued with bishop to d6. Probably he was going to land his knight to f4 or something like this, and so he wanted to provide some control for this square. And it's all good, but the only problem is, right on the next move, Karpov resigned, because white played queen to d1, and all of a sudden it turned out that white is attacking two pieces simultaneously, and black can't protect both of them. And you can see that even top players, when asked about incidents like that, very often they say, oh, I just missed it, it's just some weird move that I missed, something like this. But of course, while kind of disregarding the fact that they overlooked a certain move, they, well, maybe excuse themselves a little bit, but on the other hand, they carry on the same pattern to their next games, and they're going to keep making the same blunder. So if you just have the courage to acknowledge that, well, we all are human, we all make blunders, that's okay, there's nothing wrong with that. And if you try noticing the pattern of why this happens, then you'll be able to eliminate these kind of blunders in your future games. For example, what was the case for the current game? Why did Karpov lost the game in just 12 moves, which is crazy? You may then notice that black had two hanging pieces, meaning pieces that are not supported by other pawns or other pieces of black, right? So this bishop on d6 as well as the knight. And they're vulnerable. Since they are undefended, whenever your opponent attacks them, he can possibly capture them on the next move. And since black had two of the hanging pieces, white could take advantage of that with a double attack. Now, let's compare it with the white position for a second. What could possibly white blunder here in one move? Like nothing really, because every piece, if you look at this, the knight is supported by the pawn, right? The bishop is supported by the pawn. This bishop is protected both by the rook and king and so on, right? The queen is protected by the king and rook. Everything is protected. So there is nothing that white could possibly overlook immediately, because all of their pieces are supporting each other. And that's kind of the positions that you should strive for, where you keep your position compact, where you keep your pieces near to each other so that they support each other and you don't have hanging pieces like that. Let me bring up another example to illustrate the point. This position is from the World Championship match between Nepomniachtchi playing white against Magnus Carlsen playing black. It is white to move here. Now, what happened here is that white noticed that their pawn on c4 being attacked, and they decided to move it forward so that the pawn is supported, but the downside of this move is that after pawn to c6, white completely overlooked that their bishop is now trapped on b7. It has no way out. Black just blocked it, and on the next move, black can attack it with one of the rooks, for example, rook to b8, and simply capture it, and there is nothing white can do about that. Therefore, white played a couple more moves, but in fact, he could easily resign just right here. Therefore, we really can see that even the world's top players need to hear this lesson. They gotta stop saying, I just missed it, and figure out what is the pattern, all right? And in this case, the pattern is still the same, hanging piece. If you look at the white's position, you can easily notice that this bishop on b7 is the only piece which is not supported by other pieces, which is also distant from the rest of the white's army, and therefore it only makes sense that this bishop got in trouble, not any other piece of white. Well, I don't say that you can never let your pieces go out on opponent's half of the board and make some damage there. It's a good thing to do overall, but you just gotta know that your pieces there are vulnerable, and you gotta think twice whether your pieces are safe or not. And if Nepomniachtchi would do this, maybe he would blunder much less in this match. The next simple yet very actionable piece of advice is to warm up before you're about to play your chess game. You can make a couple push-ups and sit-ups and stuff like that. Well, just kidding, even though it's useful to do that, but I'm talking about the chess warm-up. You can, for example, play a couple bullet games, not because you care about them, but just to get your brain operate on a chess vibe, you know, so that you get into the mood of playing chess. Or you can solve a couple tactical puzzles. And even a 5-minute warm-up can really help you to get into chess and to prevent your blunders in the games that are more important to you. Tip number 4 is to avoid tactical openings if your opponent is better prepared. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Let's say you're playing black, and your pawn starts off with a king pawn move, pawn to c5, and all of a sudden he or she plays pawn to a3. A bit strange looking move, but if your opponent plays it quickly, you already have an idea that they probably know something about it, alright? Then you think, okay, or maybe he's just a beginner player, he doesn't know what he's doing, let me go knight to c6. And then your opponent quickly plays pawn to b4. By the way, it's an extremely evil gambit from the white perspective. I've got a separate video about this, which you may wish to check out, because it's a deadly opening weapon for white. And in this case, like, here's what statistically black players play most frequently. They accept the gambit, they tank this pawn here, after that white pushes c3, d4, and then black goes pawn to d5, and then get themselves involved into this tactical battle where they're not sure what they're doing, and white goes knight to a3, and very often black loses the game very quickly because white is ready to jump somewhere here, and black doesn't know how to stop that, or other threats that white has. By the way, this is also in response to those who say, well, that your traps don't work because your opponent could play something different. Well, what they could do is remarkable. What they will play is often pathetic. And most players actually fall victims of these traps. So let's just play a couple moves back and see what you could do in positions like that. Let's say you notice that your opponent is prepared better and he's trying to drag you into some tactical battle, right? Then, well, you just shouldn't do that and try to shut the position down somehow. Try to just keep developing your pieces and don't get into the unknown territory where you feel that your opponent is better prepared. You can just play something like pawn to e5 just to shut it down, and then you keep simply developing your pieces without trying to complicate matters or accept this gambit pawn or do anything weird. Just play very, very solid chess and you're good to go. The next tip may sound simplistic, but it's true and it does affect our chess performance. You gotta sleep well and stay calm. Just look at Ivanchuk in this game, and he's one of the world's top grandmasters, but you can easily see that he's really nervous in this game. He's not sure which move to play, even though you can see that the position is very, very simple, just with a few pieces left on the board. It's a rook endgame with only a couple pawns. And even though he's still getting so nervous, under these kind of circumstances, he's very easy to make a blunder or overlook something. That's why try to keep your emotions under control and you're good to go. The next example is from the game between two chess giants of the past, Petrosyan playing white against Bernstein from the candidates tournament. Here white is putting very strong pressure on black. Apart from this knight on d4, all the other black's pieces are awkward. He's got weaknesses, and pretty much any logical move would help white to probably win the game. Petrosyan played queen d6, makes sense going inside. Black responded knight f5, and here white played knight g5. Pretty good move overall, putting the knight in a strong position, aiming for knight e6, but there is one little but here, which is knight takes d6, just wins the queen for nothing, and white resigned. Now, how could such a strong player blunder a queen in one move, just like this? Well, apparently he simply didn't pay attention to black moves. He was too much occupied with his plans and intentions, and indeed, I mean, getting all these pieces, the queen on d6, the knight on g5, is just superb. It's an excellent position, but again, you can't completely forget that your opponent also has some intentions. So here's a simple piece of advice. Whenever your opponent plays a move, take 2 seconds to ask yourself, what's the point of that move? What is he going to do next? In this case, if white were to ask himself this question, he would definitely notice that knight f5 has the main purpose of capturing this queen on d6, and white would simply remove the queen backwards and would win the game afterwards. Therefore, it's a very simple check, but it will help you to save a lot of your games and prevent many, many blunders in your games. Probably one of the most powerful tips of all. This is also connected to one of my most favorite subjects about chess, how to think properly. What is the proper thinking algorithm while playing a game of chess? Not just some rules of chess, right, but how you should be thinking specifically. And if you want to know about this, you may check out my free masterclass by clicking the link on the screen or down below in the description. And now let's continue with the next tip about blunders. Garry Kasparov is playing white here against Wesley So. And it was black to play. Wesley played rook to b8, attacking this pawn on b6 potentially. Kasparov noticed this, he made the anti-blunder check that we talked about previously, and he pushed the pawn forward, pawn b7. But there is a drawback of this move. Now it opens up this rook here, and so the black can simply take the knight here on d6, and Kasparov resigned. A pretty annoying loss. Well, any kind of a blunder is annoying, right? But in this case, it was certainly very disappointing, and in a video about this, Kasparov was just screaming something and going away, and he was obviously angry and pissed off about the result. And it is understandable. If we take a move back, the white's position here is actually winning. He's dominating. He just needed to protect this pawn in some other way, for instance, knight to c4, and his position is winning because, his position is stronger, this passed pawn is very strong, and white would gradually win the game. But because of this blunder, he lost it. So here's the piece of advice about this. Before playing your move on the board, the move that you intend to play, for example, let me come back. Let's say Kasparov decided, I'm going to push the pawn forward. Before playing this move, you can ask yourself, is there any aggressive response that my opponent has? Can he make any check or capture? Those forcing moves are most annoying to you, so you got to check them first of all. Checks, captures, and attacking moves, but most importantly, checks and captures. So Kasparov needed to ask himself, after pawn goes to b7, does black have any checks or captures? And then he would definitely notice this queen takes d6 or rook takes d6 capture, because, apart from that, there aren't really many options that black has at all, right? Now, you may wonder, what's the difference? Because just, a couple minutes ago, I've told you that after your pawn plays a move, you got to ask yourself. You can see that there is a difference. Again, let me take a move back here. After black just played rook to b8, okay, in this position. So black just played rook b8, and you ask yourself, what's the intent of this move? What is black going to do? And you see, okay, the rook is hitting this pawn, I need to protect it. And you decide, okay, let's say I would like to push the pawn. Now you ask yourself a slightly different question. After I make this move, is there any aggressive response of my opponent? Can he make any check or capture? Because you see that when you play a move, the position changes a little bit. For example, this rook takes d6 was not possible before you move the pawn. Therefore, it makes sense to make this check one more time, even though I understand it's a bit annoying to make the anti-blunder check 2 times, but ideally, if you want to be completely, blunder-proven, blunder-free, then you gotta make this check 2 times. Once after your opponent plays the move, asking yourself what's the idea of your opponent, and secondly, before you're about to play the move which you intend to play, ask yourself what's the aggressive response that he or she has. Not always you have time for that in Blitz, but at least if you make one of the two, you're already gonna reduce the blunders in your games tremendously. If you made it thus far, by the way, you have a great chance to become a very strong player. Many players are not patient and they wouldn't watch a relatively longer video, but if you do, then congratulations, you're ahead of the crowd, and we only have a few more tips to cover. Now, this position is also from the World Championship match between Carlsen playing white against Nepomniachtchi, the challenger playing black. It was black to play, and black played pawn to b5, attacking the bishop, hoping for the bishop to go back, but instead Carlsen played queen a3, the move which Nepomniachtchi overlooked, and it's actually winning the game immediately, because now this is a double attack, this is a check to the king, and attack to the pawn on a7. And once black moves the king, then queen takes the pawn, and now if, let's say, black decides to get involved into this trade, then queen takes d7, and you can see that not only white won a pawn along the way, but the black's queen side is completely destroyed. These pawns are weak, and this pawn is a wannabe. It's gonna have a great life and a couple next moves and will be promoted pretty soon. So that's just a completely winning position for white. And again, if we make a couple moves back here and ask black, why would you play a move such as b5, like overlooking queen a3, black would say this common excuse, right? I just missed it. I just missed that he's got queen to a3. Oh, what an annoying blunder. But let's again try to figure out the reason, because there is always a reason why a certain move is overlooked and other moves were not overlooked. So let me actually take a couple more steps back so that you can see how it got into this position, all right? Several moves ago, they had this position on the board, and Carlsen played queen g5. He started to grasp the initiative, so that he put some pressure onto these pawns. Potentially, they're protected right now, but anyway, he's trying to put pressure. Black played c6 to protect one of them, while I traded rooks and put another one on e1, so that potentially he can make some damage here along the e-file. Black played queen of 6, offering exchange of queens. White said no, let's play on queen e3, hitting this bishop here on e8. Black played bishop d7, here h3, okay, just a prophylactic move, h4, and now c4. He's trying to hit from another angle, trying to, put some pressure here in the center this time. Black traded, and after that they played this move pawn to b5, which led to a blunder after queen to a3. But you can see that while I was putting pressure, by almost every move he was creating some threats, or at least creating some potential threats, and black was always annoyed by that. And that's the next rule. If you want to avoid blunders, you gotta grasp the initiative, and you want to be an attacking player, because when you attack, mainly your opponent has a chance to either overlook something or not, but you don't, because you're playing attacking moves forward. And that's why it's so important to grasp the initiative. I think it was Kasparov who said that if you create 10 threats in a row, 10 attacking moves in a row, your opponent will surely blunder at least once. And that is true, as we can see from this example, even on the very high level. The next tip is to make sure that you have more time on the clock than your opponent. Blunders often happen when you are in time trouble. And here's how it usually happens. Initially, a player gets into a very critical time trouble, and then they begin the rush, and it is just logical that they can easily make a blunder and overlook something and lose the game. But you don't have to wait till the situation is absolutely critical. And even if you're down on time, it's not such a big of a problem if your opponent is in the same or better worse situation, right? So the rules were simple. Keep an eye on the clock, and if you notice that your opponent is ahead, meaning that you're behind on time, you gotta speed up, right? So that you never have that position where at the end of the game you have 10 seconds and your opponent has 1 minute, because that is really deadly. And yeah, as simple as that, it's very effective, especially in Blitz. This is a position from my game. Actually, I was playing black, and it is white to play. White player is a pot of. In this position, black is 2 pawns up, and he's putting pressure here on this a3 bishop, for instance, is hanging. It's clear that black's position is winning, and white decided to take his chance and played queen to e6, trying to complicate matters. Now, what should black play here? It's worth mentioning that at this point we both were in time trouble already. And here's the rule: when you're in time trouble, simplify the position. In other words, do not play as usual, but simplify the position. Trade pieces, right? That's it. Because my initial thought was that, well, I can grab this queen here. It's probably should win, right? Because if I take it here, okay, he can also take the queen on c8, but then here I can either take this, or maybe I can even take here on f2 and just go for the king attack, because this king now looks really, really bad. Probably black will checkmate it soon. And it seemed like very easily winning for black, right? But if I take a step back here, you can notice that at this point, instead of queen takes c8 immediately, white can play this intermediate check queen to f5, trying to push the black's king to the back rank, so that after that they can grab the rook with another check, and after that they can keep chasing the king. And if black decides, okay, I don't want that, let's kind of push this queen away, then black can overlook another sudden attack and move rook b7. Instead of taking the rook immediately, white can involve the rook into the attack, and it looks pretty bad for black at this point. Maybe he's actually losing. It's probably true. And that's how very often players lose annoying games: when you had an advantage, you got it all. It seems like you deserve to win, but then just one inaccurate move and you lose. So to avoid things like that, let's take a couple moves back here. So in this position, instead of getting into tactical troubles and complications, especially when you're down on time, it's much better to simplify the position. So what I played in the game was queen to c6. Alright, another option would be playing queen to d7 with a similar intent. So after you play this, you offer an exchange of pieces, right? That's number one. So after that, even when you're down on time, it's easy to play that because you only have a few pieces to take care of. The second thing is one of the other principles we talked about previously: to avoid hanging pieces, to make sure that all your pieces are protected, right? They're protecting each other so that you cannot possibly blunder anything, because everything is already covered in advance, right? And I just played this move and won the game easily, even though it took a bit longer, but it was a sure way. I'm curious which tip resonated with you the most. You may write it down in the comments below to make sure that it also sticks into your head as well, and so that you know what to focus on within your next games to make sure you are blunder free, or at least reduce the blunders in your games. For more tips, you may also check out my free masterclass by clicking the link below, and best of luck in your chess battles.